And we are back with the Every Game on the Board college football betting podcast with the last guest up, our closer, Robbie Veno. Rob, welcome in.
Good afternoon, Drew. How are you today?
I'm doing good, man. We've had some good conversations here, gone over the whole card. 8-8, we'll be going through the end of the college football card. We got SMU at Tulane. 58 the total, with Tulane laying 6.5 or 7 at home in the Big Easy. How would you look to bet this one?
You know, how about if we start in a unique place in this game, Drew, because now that we've got, around 6 games played by every team, I think it's significant to note how these teams have played where first half, second half betting is concerned. I've mentioned a few random stats. I've tweeted a few random stats about these teams and their first half, second half performances. But for those out there who like to divide the game up or would rather bet, half rather than the full game, SMU is a team to look at here, Drew. Surprisingly to me, when I went over their numbers this morning, as far as totals are concerned in the first half, this team against FCS competition, I'm going to eliminate the Houston Baptist game. So they played 5 FBS teams, I'll eliminate the FCS Houston Baptist. In the first half of games against FBS teams so far, SMU 0-5 under the total in each and every one of those 5 games. Like I say, a little bit surprising to me because you would expect a Sonny Dykes air raid offense to produce points. Hasn't been the case. SMU's been a pretty slow starter this year, and they've been fairly decent on the defensive side of the football first half. So just an extra way to look if you tend to do such things. SMU, a complete under team where first halves are concerned. Like I say, 0-5 to the under so far to start the season. Here against Tulane, both teams coming off a bye in what's probably one of the more competitive, even though it's lower echelon, Western Division battles of the AAC. I think that both teams have shown some spark, Drew. I watched that game prior to the bye, SMU in Central Florida, and we all know Central Florida is extremely difficult to defend. SMU didn't do a horrible job of it. Obviously, at the end of the day, when you look at 541 total yards, you think they got steamrolled, but not necessarily the case. They had a few stops and a few possessions where, UCF is so used to getting into the end zone when they get down the field, and SMU held them to a few field goals in that game, which I thought were pretty good on their defensive end. I think they've played a little bit tougher schedule than has Tulane, and I'm not going to bash Tulane's schedule. It's not a bad one, but when you've gone through North Texas, TCU, Michigan, and UCF, that's 4 pretty good teams, especially on the defensive side of the football when we're talking about Michigan, TCU, and North Texas. I think the schedule's been a little bit better. I know Tulane has somewhat of a revenge factor here, and their last home game was a real good one, which is a counter-argument to SMU and makes it a little bit difficult to play this game. I don't find a lot statistically, fundamentally, to separate these two. Tulane should be able to run, which is what they do best. SMU should be able to pass, which is what they do best. So maybe a first half under, or even a look at the second half over, where SMU's been extremely strong the opposite way. They've been 4-2 to the over in second halves.
Robbie, we got 389, 390, NC State and Clemson. This is a big one here, one of the biggest of the weekends. 56 the total, with Clemson laying 17.5 or 18 at home.
Just staying with that same theme real quick here, Drew. Both of these teams have been extreme fast starters in the first half of games so far this year. Clemson, average score in the first half against their opponents, 21-4. Average score for NC State, 20-6 first half. So both of these teams have used defense to get out in front early on. I think it's interesting because when we first glimpse of Clemson this year, Drew, and I think first reaction of most is that they're kind of uneven offensively, maybe not as consistent offensively, maybe not even as good. Some people would have that opinion, or not even as good offensively as they've been in the past. But when you check them out, 531 yards a game isn't too shabby, 42 points per game. They have not had a defensive who's who to play so far. They did have to play Texas A&M, which brings a real good run defense to the table. But other than that, not a bunch of good defenses here played by Clemson. On that same note, for NC State, this is by far the most difficult opponent they've played all season long. Once again, like SMU Tulane, both teams off of a bye. That makes it very interesting. NC State, one of those teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference, Drew, and inside that East Division, that's unafraid when it comes to Clemson. Had an opportunity to beat them a couple years ago if they could have kicked a short field goal in regulation time. Didn't happen. They wound up losing. But certainly the chatter down there in Raleigh is that they're ready for this. They do have the veteran quarterback in Ryan Finley, and they are a little bit skewed offensively. They throw the ball much more effectively than they run it. They're going to have to protect the quarterback here. Clemson, obviously, with the good defensive line, but Ryan Finley's seen it before, so I think that this might be an overlay here. I would look to NC State plus the big points. I think defensively they can do some damage here, at least contain Trevor Lawrence and company, and offensively be able to score enough to get in under that number. Yeah,
you bring up some good points with NC State. I mean, their offense, there's no doubt it's humming. It's pretty good. Ryan Finley's pretty good. The offensive coordinator, Eli Dirkowitz, he's kind of a Gus Malzahn disciple. They're always going to draw up some new wrinkles that Clemson hasn't seen. So be sure to kind of watch that, because off of a bye week they'll have something up their sleeves, I'm sure. One thing that does scare me though, Robbie, and you said be able to contain Clemson offensively, but when you really break down NC State's defense, their linebackers, they're light, they're thin, they're inexperienced at linebacker. In NC State's defensive line, it's not the same as it was. So you brought up their schedule not being that strong. It is something that scares me, because we've seen Clemson when they need to, and primarily against Syracuse. It was a close game, and at the end there, they just kind of ran the ball down their throat and scored to win the game, and with their backup quarterback. So it does kind of scare me as far as I was looking to bet NC State plus 17, but I could see Clemson just kind of steamrolling it down their throat, being the bigger, stronger, faster offensive line, just leaning on them. Does that scare you at all, or no? You think that they'll be able to contain them?
Yeah, no, it does a little bit, Drew, and it would have to. I mean, the best team NC State's played all season long was Boston College without A.J. Dillon, their top tailback. So there's still a bit of an unknown. And I'll tell you, just from being down there 2 weeks ago in Raleigh, and my nephew actually is a senior at NC State, or was a senior at NC State last year, graduated since, still goes to all the games close to the program. They were real happy that the West Virginia game got canceled, because they didn't think they could handle West Virginia. So with that in mind, West Virginia, Clemson, that would put a little fear into your mind as well if you were going to back NC State. The Trevor Lawrence deal as a freshman quarterback in a game like this, we'll see. And again, to start the season, Drew, my opinion of NC State was there was no way they could be as good defensively, or anywhere near as good defensively as they were last year, after Bradley Chubb and that entire defensive line went to the NFL. Somehow they've surprised. Is it a product of the schedule, or are they that good? I know their junior college recruiting has picked up. Just to hit on one note that you had real quick before we get on to the next game, Eli Drinkwitz from Boise State, Ryan Finley started at Boise State. They both came together. When you mention new wrinkles, those are Boise State-type wrinkles that Clemson might see here. So with a week to prepare, week to get ready, I'm sure something will be in the bag. Dave Doran's team won't be afraid. It's a tough game to play, but I think that 17 might be a bit too much here for Clemson. We'll see.
Moving down the card, we got 391, 392, Kansas at Texas Tech, 58.5 the total. Texas Tech in that pretty good defense. You never really hear that with Texas Tech. They're having to lay 18 at home against the lowly Jayhawks. Would you look to bet this one, Robbie?
The numbers did suggest off of last year that Texas Tech had been making strides on the defensive side of the football, and it's continued so far this year. Dakota Allen, middle linebacker for that team, a kid for anybody who watched that Netflix series Last Chance U. You remember him from East Mississippi Junior College. He was actually banned from the Texas Tech campus when they kicked him out of there, and has, to his credit, made it all the way back to Texas Tech and become the best defensive player that they have. Their rush defense especially has been pretty good this season, but there's a lot to dissect in this game, Drew. Obviously, Kansas before the bye, they fire offensive coordinator Doug Meacham. Now, that offensive play calling duty is going to fall on the shoulders of head coach David Beatty. But the offense itself, the game prep, the offensive game plan, going to be a collective effort. But Beatty's going to call plays. He said the offense isn't going to change that much. They're going to still continue to do what they've done so far this season. And for this team, it's been, if you just look at their play calling percentages thus far through 6 games, it's been run-oriented, 53.6% run plays, 46.4 pass plays. Puka Williams, the freshman tailback, has been a real revelation here. And I think it goes to the point of increased recruiting by David Beatty. You know, we read a lot about how Kansas is getting better, but some of these young kids, really, they've done good with their recruits, and their evaluation of talent has been real good. So KU on a bit of an upswing. We'll see how that offense goes here. I wouldn't expect it to change much. Beatty's called plays before. That shouldn't be a problem. And they're focused on being better offensively this week. The problem for them, Drew, I'll break out a little split here in KU's pass defense. First 3 games they played this year, all non-conference affairs, all against weak competition. Nicholls State, Central Michigan, and Rutgers. Not great passing teams, any of those 3. They only allowed 147.7 passing yards in those 3 games, only 50.6% completions. Last 3 games they played, a little different because they're all against Big 12 opponents, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia. That 148 per game allowed went up to 300 per game allowed. The 50% completions have gone up to 70% completions. 5.4 yards attempt to start the season, 10.0 yards per attempt last 3 games. So the pass defense, a real weakness here. Question becomes in this game, Drew, if you just look at it fundamentally, can Texas Tech exploit it with Jet Duffy? Number 3 quarterback is by far the worst of the throwing quarterbacks that this team has. He was actually benched last game before the bye. They brought McLean Carter, the original starter, back in game 1 in, but his ankle injury is too severe for him to play, so he's not going to play this week either. It's going to be Duffy again, who would rather run than throw. And Texas Tech has some injury concerns at wide receiver. Their top guy, T.J. Vasher, may not go. How about this? During the week, head coach Cliff Kingsbury skipped by everybody at wide receiver and went right to his 2 true freshmen and gave them first-team reps this week. You may see true freshmen on the field at receiver. Kingsbury has more faith in these guys than the upperclassmen right now. I really wanted to play over in this game, Drew, but there's a lot of things to weed through here to see if it can get there. I'm not so sure now. The numbers come down from, I think, 61 to 58.5, which in a Texas Tech game is extremely low. But we'll have to see. Maybe Kingsbury came up with something during the bye week. Interesting matchup for sure.
Robbie, we've got 393, 394 UTSA. That's Texas San Antonio traveling to Hattiesburg, Mississippi to take on Southern Miss. 44 the total, 17.5 Southern Miss laying at home.
Yeah, difficult. When you break down UTSA and you find out that, sure, they're 3-4, but the 3 wins are against Texas State, Texas El Paso, and Rice. And they're not overwhelming wins either. I mean, 25-21, 30-21, 20-3. That's horrendous. So they come back last week and they play one of the CUSA West better teams, Louisiana Tech, and they get slammed 31-3. And the score is pretty indicative. I mean, once again, the offense goes dry, only puts up 286 yards. They brought in Al Borges to be the offensive coordinator for this team this year, and it just hasn't panned out at all. 255 yards per game on offense against this Southern Miss team. I would doubt that flies very much here. Southern Miss, a very capable defense, having a good year defensively overall, only allowing 327 per game. And boy, Jack Abraham, the quarterback for this team, has been a real revelation, because when Quadra Griggs wasn't able to play, when he was suspended to start the season, some thought Chicken Little, the sky is falling, and all Abraham's done is come in and complete over 70% of his passes. There's certainly a lot of holes in this UTSA defense. I'd look to play Southern Miss in this game if I was going to play at all.
Al Borges, who's the OC for?
He's the new OC for UTSA.
Oh, man, Robbie, I'm surprised that guy's still – he was the OC when I was a freshman at Auburn.
Yeah, he's been around the block, right?
he's had a slow descent here in college football. He was out in San Jose State, right?
Yeah, he was before Auburn. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting stuff. All right, we got 395, 396 Charlotte at MTSU. Looks like the 49ers catching 16.5, 48.5 the total.
Yeah, boy, impressive win last week by Charlotte. I don't know if that carries over here, though, Drew. I think that's probably more of a mirage than a reality for them. And for MTSU, said it before, it's a different team this year. It really is. It doesn't have the look of head coach Stockstill's offenses of years past, even though his son is still there slinging the ball around. They're just far more methodical anymore. We've gone over this before. They seem to take it in smaller chunks rather than larger chunks at the current time. But I still think they're the far superior team when you go over numbers as opposed to Charlotte. Charlotte does have one particular statistic that sticks out like a sore thumb, and that's allowing 92 yards per game on the ground. Somehow, some way, I don't know how that's happened, but it has, and we'll see if MTSU can run the ball a little bit on them. I would suspect that they can. I like the diversity in the Middle Tennessee offense, the balance, the fact that they can run or pass, but I don't like laying 17 with them, Drew, because they just don't put up points the way they used to. And when you're going to lay this kind of number, you almost have to be assured you're going to reach the 38-point mark, which used to be a foregone conclusion with MTSU. Not so much nowadays. 17's an awful big number for them to lay. Even though I think they're the better team, I don't think they're that much better. So I'd probably look at Charlotte. The total here has come down from 52.5 to 48, which is a big, or 48.5, which is a big drop in total. And it shows you just how far Middle Tennessee has declined offensively.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I believe both quarterbacks are banged up, so it might affect that as well as the total. But here's a game where we go from 48.5 to 74. Memphis at Missouri. Two offenses that can get up and down for sure. Looks like 74 the total, 8.5 now. We're seeing some nines out there. Missouri laying at home, Robbie.
Yeah, Drew Lock has really missed Emmanuel Hall at wide receiver the last couple of weeks. I don't think he's going to play here either. But as we've said before, the good news for Mizzou is that they're so rich in depth at the wide receiver position. I mean, the freshman Knox has been a revelation, and they can still move the football up and down the field regardless. They get a little break, step down in class for sure, defensively in this matchup. You go from playing Alabama to now playing Memphis. Should be able to move the ball. Memphis comes off that. Boy, what a disappointing loss to Central Florida last week, right? It looked like Memphis had them at home. I think it was 30-14. At one point, they end up losing 31-30. But I expect them to come here. This is kind of, to me, I flash back to the Middle Tennessee visit to Columbia, Missouri a couple years back where MTSU was a real high-flying offense, much like Memphis now. And that game just was points on top of points on top of points. And I'll tell you the one bad thing for Missouri in this game is, here's another thing we've talked about, Drew, but their defensive backfield at Mizzou is just not good enough to handle these Memphis wide receivers, in my estimation. Once again, Mizzou does things a little bit different. They've tried to put athletes in the defensive backfield rather than getting true defensive backs. It shows up a lot with this team. What did Alabama score in 16 seconds to start that game last week? A pass to Jerry Jeudy. So I think you're going to see points both ways. The total indicates that up at 74, but this is a 74, Drew, that weather's going to be pretty good there. I think may look real small. At halftime, we may see this game up in the vicinity of 28-21, 28-24. And when you're sitting at 50 at halftime looking at 74, it looks a lot different than it does before the game starts.
Robbie, it's funny you bring up, the defensive backs, just kind of old high school quarterbacks are the best athlete on the team and make them a defensive back, because Auburn does that same thing, and they're the next team up. And you'll see it sometimes in tackling, because, they'll be great athletes, cover corners, safeties, stuff like that, but going against a tough running team is where I think you really see it, because the form tackling, it's just not all there because they only have about a year or two of really doing it. But next game up, we got 397, 398, or 399, 400, Auburn, Mississippi. Auburn, man, they've kind of been a train wreck here the last couple weeks. Robbie. But it's interesting to get your take. Is this a kind of a falling knife and stay away, or is it a buy low opportunity on the Tigers? 3.5 they're laying on the highway, 62.5 the total.
My initial reaction, Drew, would be it's a buy low situation, and that, I guess, because you could argue a lot of ways in this game and come with good arguments both ways in this game, but I think for me, the number one deal here is the way Ole Miss offensively has performed against exceptional defenses so far this season. They haven't. They fell flat on their face against Alabama. They fell flat on their face against LSU. Auburn's defense is cut from that same mold. DK Metcalf now gone for the year, one of the top 2 wide receivers on this team. Although, again, like Missouri, this is a team deep in wide receivers, so Metcalf will be missed because of his size inside the red zone. But when you have Lodge and Sanders and Knox and these guys behind him, they certainly have replacements. But I just don't like the way they play against strong defensive fronts, teams that can apply pressure. Has really bothered Ole Miss so far this season. They haven't been able to run the football with Scotty Phillips against those types of teams. And, you know, I guess you could identify Ole Miss right now as the classic bully. When they get opposition that can't play any defense, they're ringing up points. When you get teams like this that are stout at the point of attack, they don't do much of anything. Of course, the counter to that is, you know, Auburn's offense doesn't do anything against anybody. And Mississippi's got a horrendous defense. If ever there's a time for Stidham, and Stidham got a vote of confidence this week from his head coach, they're going to stick with him. I don't know that everything's his fault. Certainly it's a collective effort in football. You don't blame everything on one player. But, boy, they should move the football this week, Drew. And 3.5 to me just looks small. Auburn's power rating has obviously come down over the course of the last couple of weeks because they haven't been real productive in games. But still, to me, the way Ole Miss has been beaten up by strong defensive teams so far this season in that SEC West, I could see the same thing happening again. Power ratings, despite the drop, and here's where I kind of lean towards Auburn even more, Drew, and I never play a game specifically off of a power rating, but certainly it's a point of foundation and a place to start. My power ratings show Auburn still 7 better than Ole Miss, even on the road. So to me, there's value here. To me, Ole Miss's inability against really strong defenses shows up in this game. I'd probably look to Auburn.
Right, we got 401, 402, ODU, Old Dominion at Western Kentucky, 55 the total. Looks like the Monarchs catching 4.5 or 5, depending where you're shopping against the Hilltoppers. Would you look to bet this one?
I'd look to bet ODU, I have to tell you. We just talked about Charlotte having an impressive win last week. You know that win was against WKU. They beat Western Kentucky 40-14.
Yeah, they've fallen off here.
Mike Sanford Jr. has his hands full there. The differential between what this team was with Jeff Brom and what this team is with Sanford Jr. is night and day. The fan base obviously is unhappy there because they got used to winning. Now all of a sudden they can't come within 4 touchdowns of Charlotte. Very disappointing. The offense has been a disaster for a lot of reasons. You know, dates way back about 5 weeks ago. The offensive line, complete mess. They were repositioning guys. Quarterback position was a mess. Steven Duncan's become the new guy there. But, you know, overall, nothing's meshed, Drew. It looked for a slight minute there that maybe they were starting to come around. But that loss last week is horrendous. And when you go up against this ODU passing game, you've got big troubles if you can't score. So you're going to take points or get points with ODU, despite the fact that Old Dominion's defense is absolutely miserable and can be attacked through the air specifically. I just don't see any way that Western Kentucky can score enough points to win this game by more than 5.5. So I would definitely take Old Dominion in that spot.
Robbie, we got Mississippi State traveling to the Bayou to take on LSU. 2 good defensive fronts here. 6.5 LSU laying at home. 45 the total. I don't see it getting to 45. I like the under here, Robbie. What do you say?
Well, you know, from a totals perspective, you would have to. And I had said yesterday that in college football nowadays, it becomes really difficult to play under a total that's listed at 45. I forget which game we were going over yesterday where that came into play, but it does make it hard. But with these two defenses, not so hard. You could certainly see a maximum ceiling for this game is something like 23-20, which still stays underneath the total. I'm very interested to see how, Ed Orgeron gets his team up again this week. LSU has pulled off some really, really big wins, so there shouldn't be any doubters left now. I mean, that win over Georgia was decisive, and it came on the heels of the Florida game prior to that where they had lost. It's a real gauntlet here. Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State matches up real well with LSU, though, Drew. And when I was going over this game, the one thing that it kept coming down to for me was Nick Fitzgerald being able to make plays outside the pocket. I think it could certainly come down to that. He's not the most accurate thrower in the world, and LSU defensively could cause him some troubles. But Mississippi State's defensive line is going to do the same to Joe Burrow and probably keep that running game of LSU much quieter than it was last week against Georgia. To me, the difference between Mississippi State defensively and Georgia defensively is significant. So I think there's a step up in class for LSU here. I kind of like the MSU side, to tell you the truth. I think that they bring these two teams are like mirror images of one another. And I think that in the end, I would like to have the quarterback who can make a play when things break down, because in the end, that and special teams might decide this game.
Yeah, I agree with you on pretty much everything. LSU can throw it a little better, though, right, Robbie?
You know what? It's funny, Drew. When you look at their numbers, 202 to the decimal point, 202.1 yards rushing per game, 202.1 yards passing per game. That's balance. That's real good balance. So they can throw it a little bit. Mississippi State's not far behind, $190 a game thrown, and I think some of that is due to the fact that Fitzgerald misses passes. Let's face it, he misses a lot of open guys. He can always have that one breakout game. We've seen it before where he throws the ball exceptionally. Don't know that it'll be here, but I'd rather have his overall playmaking ability over that of Joe Burrow here in this game.
Right, we've got a good one in the Pac-12 here. It could go a long way to who wins the Pac-12 South, although Arizona State and Colorado might have something to say with that. We got USC traveling to Utah. Looks like 48 the total, with the Utes laying 7 at home in Salt Lake. How do you look to bet this one?
Yeah, I don't think I'd look any other way right now than Utah if I was going to play any Utah game at this point. I think that team is on a roll. That team is extremely confident. USC suffered a real tough injury at the linebacker position this week, which weakens their defense. And I think that the way we talked a little bit about Tyler Huntley and that offense yesterday, Britton Covey, and the way these guys are playing, both running and throwing the football, I think that USC losing any player of significance on the defensive side hurts them right now. And once again, here we go with the freshman quarterback in a big game in the Pac-12. Didn't work out so good at Stanford. We're going to see if it works out here. I don't know that it will. I really, like I say, like Utah, between them and Oregon for me right now in that conference overall, Drew. And I know Oregon's got a little bit of a path if they win out to maybe getting some eyes open to maybe them making the college football playoff. It's a long shot. But between Utah and Oregon, I don't think I'd play anybody else against Utah right now other than Oregon, and that's iffy. Just like the way they're playing offense. And when their offense is good, it just makes that defense so much better. So I think USC's in for some trouble here. I don't think they'll run the ball effectively. Utah's a great run defense. I think 87 yards per game allowed on the ground. And if you're going to put the ball, once again, in the freshman quarterback's hands here, I don't know that that's going to go so well for USC. So I'd probably be on Utah in that game.
All right, Robbie. Well, we got guys. Remember Robbie Veno's coupon code? It's Veno half, VENOHALF, for half off the rest of his college football rest of the season. Robbie's been really good. His 4 and 5% plays, 21 and 12, 64% on the year in college football, up just under 10 units of profit. Robbie, we're going to end it with 2 degenerate specials, and I say that tongue-in-cheek because I love these type of games. 407-408 San Jose State at San Diego State. 42.5 the total, with San Diego State laying 4 touchdowns, 28 at home. How do you look at it?
We've talked about them so much as double-digit favorites this year, Drew, that I don't know what else we could say that would be different from what listeners have heard already when we discuss San Diego State at home. I'll say this. San Jose State cannot run the football. They run for about 60 yards a game, maybe even less, 50 yards a game, excuse me. They have to put the ball up in the air to be successful. San Diego State doesn't allow teams to run on them anyway. So, when San Jose State becomes one-handed on offense, can they really protect Josh Love and allow him the time to throw the football? This is a team that in spurts this year, they've shown the ability to throw the football. In that game against Colorado State 2 weeks ago, where they scored 30 points in the third quarter, they went up and down the field throwing the football. But the difference between the pass pressure applied by San Diego State and the pass pressure applied by Colorado State are two different things. And when San Diego State knows you have to drop back, it's troublesome. Can you lay this type of number with them? Probably not. Can San Diego State turn a couple of takeaways into instant points? Probably so. That's the only way they'll get here, in my estimation. To me, Drew, 42-7 wouldn't be a surprise if San Diego State wins by that final score. But can you really trust them to do so? Remember last week, and we had a little discussion about San Diego State beat writers thinking that Agnew at quarterback might be an upgrade from Chapman. Well, Agnew didn't look like any kind of an upgrade last week, so he's still got some things to iron out here. San Diego State issues on offense, obviously very methodical. When you're trying to cover 28, that's not good. Love to just hand it off and sit back and play defense. Like I say, a lot of this is repetitive, but we keep getting San Diego State in the same position, heavy home favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. And an even better matchup here to end the Saturday with. It's 12 o'clock Eastern start. It's out in Hawaii. We got Nevada at Hawaii. Last game here, 66 the total, with the Rainbows, or the Rainbow Warriors, laying 3 at home. Robbie, how would you look to bet this one?
Yeah, both quarterbacks came back last week, which is good news. Ty Ganji almost led the upset of Boise State for Nevada at home, even though you could see in watching Ty Ganji last week that the leg still wasn't 100%. He was kind of gimping around out there, but he's such a leader for that team. It's important to have him. They're a real good – they become a real good balanced offense. They've got weaponry, and they've got the playbook to score quick. Hawaii doesn't necessarily defend that well. Now, at home, early in games, if you just go through their first quarter, first half numbers at home, they've been able to get ahead of teams quick, and the teams that they've played at home haven't been able to come from behind. Nevada doesn't really fit that description. They can come from behind with their explosiveness, and I don't know that Hawaii will be able to get on top of Nevada real quick here. So from a side perspective, maybe I'd look at the Wolfpack. However, I don't think I'd be too quick to run to the window with that, because Hawaii with that run and shoot offense. And it's funny to me, Drew, to listen to commentary of games as we're watching them. Sometimes I don't see what analysts and play-by-play guys are seeing. We don't see things eye to eye, but there's a lot of talk about how much improved Nevada is on the defensive side of the football. And when push comes to shove, the numbers just don't back that up. I think against this run and shoot offense, Hawaii can have pretty good – Nevada will have some difficulty. And I think the other way as well, Nevada's going to provide a lot of difficulty for that Hawaii defense. Totals come down, maybe 70, a little bit too high priced, but at 66.5, I might be able to get involved there.
Good stuff, Robbie. And guys, remember, 21-12 on his top plays. He's got one coming up in college football on sportsmemo.com. Make sure to check that out tonight. 21-12, 64% on his top plays, up almost 10 units overall, every play released in college football. Guys, remember his coupon code, Veno, for half off his rest of the season college football. We'll be back tomorrow with the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast. Thanks for listening.